Hello and welcome to episode 63 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. This week's guest is Mary-Eleanor Joyce. Mary-Eleanor is the guitar player and drummer in several Athens bands, including the incredibly influential Incendiaries, as well as Maximum Busy Muscle, and she's got a new project called Sewer Kitty that's going to be absolutely great. I wanted to talk to Mary-Eleanor because she's in that unique position a lot of Gen X people are in, where you waited a while to start a family, and so you've got young kids to care for while also caring for aging parents who may have chronic illness or dementia or some other illness that requires custodial care or around-the-clock care. Maybe you're trying to do it at home or whatever, while also like trying to balance an artistic life. And so I felt like it was an important conversation to have. If this is your first episode of Crash and Ride is a long-form interview podcast where I talk to musicians who survived anxiety, depression, and addiction, and trauma, and really any form of mental illness or mental distress. I felt like if I could sit down and have honest conversations with other musicians about the things that make us sad, we could start to sort of see some of ourselves in others and maybe start to get better. That seems particularly relevant right now. As I record this, it's August 8th of 2020. Haven't played a show since March. I haven't really been able to make any money off music since then. I'm a sideman and touring drummer, and just kind of going to the grocery store, going and pick up a pizza every now and then, going out of the garden. That's what I do right now. I know a lot of you are in the same boat. I'm seeing a lot of reports of suicides, a lot of reports of drug overdoses. My extended family of musicians is really struggling, and I hope that we can do some interviews on this show that maybe help in some way. My routine this year has been stay up late playing guitar, get up, make breakfast for everybody, help the kiddo with their schoolwork, head out to the garden, put in a couple hours out there. The garden has been sort of frustrating, had raccoons eat my entire corn crop. If you're a frequent listener of the show, you know that. But then this week, we were out there in the evening getting some basil and peppers and some tomatoes for a red sauce, and there was a motherfucking canebrake rattler just hanging out in the garden. So that wasn't relaxing. Man, it's 2020 has been a motherfucker. A couple of quick announcements. Crash and Ride is brought to you in part by Greer Amplification. Greer Amps builds the best boutique effects pedals available. If you're looking for an overdrive, boost, fuzz, compressor, or tremolo that is rugged, road-tested, and at home, on stage, in the studio, or in your living room, Greer has a pedal for you. Nick and his staff strive to build the best products around with the best tone you've ever heard. They believe in their products, and they stand behind them too, backing each one up with a lifetime warranty to the original owner. Each Greer Amps product is hand-built in Athens, Georgia, USA. Go to www.greeramps.com or visit your favorite music retailer today. Nick has a new pedal out called the Guerrilla Warfare, spelled like Gorilla instead of Guerilla. And I saw some reviews of it online, some pedal demos, and man, it sounds incredible. This one guy was using it on bass, and it sounded really doomy and cool, and man, I kind of want one. I've already got his high-gain pedal called the Sucker Punch that is like a real aggro, super high-gain pedal. Sounds kind of like a triple rectifier or one of those other sort of modern high-gain amps, but it sounds good on everything. Single coil, humbucker, whatever I put through it, P90, all sounds really good. So be on the lookout for the Guerrilla Warfare. Crash and Ride is also brought to you by Jittery Joe's, a local coffee roaster based here in Athens, Georgia. They have a special espresso blend named after the podcast. You can get Crash and Ride espresso, whole bean or ground, in cans from our website at crashandridepodcast.com. Or I'd encourage you, in the current environment where a lot of small businesses run by people that we know and love are struggling, go to hendershotsathens.com and pick up a can there. You can also get Seth Hendershot. That's the guy who owns Hendershots. He's a local musician, swell guy. He's a great dad, good friend, super, super good guy. On the Hendershots website, he's also selling his 45 and 78 RPM roast. That's a medium and a dark roast. He's going to introduce a 33 RPM roast. That's a light roast. You can also pick up the Widespread Panic blend there. You can pick up the Kishibashi blend. Kishibashi is an amazing indie rock band from here in Athens, Georgia. Also, there's all manner of Hendershots paraphernalia, the t-shirts and hats and stickers and stuff. Every dollar you spend at hendershotsathens.com is a dollar that goes back into our local economy and helps Seth keep a bunch of really nice people employed. Hendershots is a great live music venue. I love playing there. I love going there to read in the afternoons. I love going there to write when I need to sit down and write somewhere where I can have some privacy, and if they don't survive the COVID-19 epidemic, then it's going to be a huge loss for Athens. Hendershotsathens.com. Hendershotsathens.com. Check out their web store. Get your Crash and Ride Espresso there and 100 other things. It's been kind of an exciting week around here, and by that I mean shitty. It's been kind of shitty. My laptop died, the one I've been doing the podcast on this entire year, and a couple of people have jumped up to help, and I really appreciate it. I'm currently running on a borrowed laptop, 2010 MacBook. I just moved my hard drive into it. Seems to be working okay. But if you're a person who's doing a podcast on a portable computer, I want to talk to you about your rig. Hit me up at crashandride@protonmail.com. I got to decide what move I'm going to make here. I wouldn't mind finding another 2012 MacBook Pro and sticking the same SSD in it. I'm getting the RAM up, and that seems like it'll be pretty stable. But I'm also not averse to maybe trying a Windows machine. I'm not really hyped on buying like a brand new Mac laptop, spending $1,500 and then not being able to upgrade the RAM or having to get rid of my FireWire 800 drive and all that stuff. So let's talk about it off the air. crashandride@protonmail.com. Okay, Mary-Eleanor Joyce is a really gifted drummer, really talented guitar player. She's been in some really, really great Athens bands. She's also an adoptive mom, and as an adoptive dad, we had a lot to talk about. And she's also been caring for her father. And when I first spoke to her last week, it was Tuesday night. I called her, and we started talking, but we were talking over Skype, and we did about an hour, and we were getting into some really deep and important stuff, and the call quality was so bad that I finally at like the hour point was like, hey, Mary, I got to pull the plug on this interview, and we got to figure something else out, because you're saying a lot of really important stuff, and I'm losing about a third of it. And I felt like that would be a disservice to her, disservice to you, the listener. And I just was like, all right, I'm going to get a 12-foot XLR cable and come to your porch, and we're going to sit a safe distance apart so we don't get each other sick, and we're going to do this interview in person. And she said, okay. And I felt a little trepidatious about it, because she had been really open about what it was like to sort of lose your father in slow motion to dementia. And we had a really good talk, and I just felt like I didn't capture it. It wasn't there sound-wise. And so we agreed to meet the next night. I rolled all my cables up, folded my laptop up, stuck it in a bag, and got ready to go. And the next morning, she texted me to say that her father had passed during the night. And I said, do you still want to do this? And she said, yes. Yes, I do. I really do. And so I went over there in the evening, and we sat out on the back porch. And, you can hear all the crickets and cicadas in the background. And you can hear her cat knocking things over, chasing cockroaches in the dark. And she had a couple beers. And, well, it was a really good talk. Really intimate talk. A really honest talk. Someone who just lost her dad, to be so available. I'm really grateful for that, and the trust that she showed me, and the fact that she was willing to have this whole conversation over again was pretty remarkable. And I'm really grateful for it. I know a lot of the people who listen to this show have older parents. Some of you have had to make some really difficult decisions about care for them, and how that impacts your life, especially if you're raising kids or playing in music or whatever. So I'm really proud of this interview, and I'm really glad we did it. So let's jump into our interview with Mary-Eleanor Joyce. I don't usually hold these microphones. I usually have them in a stand. It feels like this enormous popsicle.
My cat is hunting cockroaches behind you right now.
Well, first of all, I'm really sorry about your father.
Thank you. It's a weird kind of combination of sad, but also glad that that was done, because he was in pain and he wasn't really present anymore.
Yeah. He'd been suffering from dementia for, 5 years?
8 years?
8 years. That's right. It was 5 years since I moved down here. But
Yeah. I actually looked back at pictures and realized it was 6. I can't believe it's been that long.
yeah. And he's been in managed care for a number of years.
4 years there.
And before that, your family was in Wilmington, North Carolina?
Yeah, my parents had lived there for, years. They moved my senior year of high school.
Yeah. Did they retire there, or what were they doing there?
Kinda. Yeah. My father was kind of forced into early retirement.
Was that because of symptoms of what he...
No, that was basically... So he was an editor-producer at Georgia Public Broadcasting.
Yeah.
And when he started, you had to have all these really specialized skills, and it was like a wall of a computer. And then by the end, everyone, they could hire somebody just out of college to do that on a laptop.
Yeah.
So he was let go, and they decided to go ahead and move up to North Carolina. They'd always wanted to retire there.
How long did your dad have in retirement before he started struggling with the cognitive issues?
Quite a while.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they had some really good years in North Carolina, and I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah.
They were able to have fun and do all the things that they wanted to do but couldn't because they had 2 kids.
Yeah.
So he had a boat, and he would go sailing, and they would go to the theater. They had some really good years there.
Yeah. Your dad passed this morning, is that right?
Yeah, early this morning, around 4 or 5 this morning.
And they called you then, or?
My mom called me around 6:30 to let me know.
After your dad's onset of his cognitive issues, when we spoke about this before, you mentioned that he had a suicide attempt.
Yeah, so the suicide attempt happened before the diagnosis.
Yeah.
So I think basically he knew something was wrong, but didn't know what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And it really sent him into a depression spiral.
How old was he at that time?
$70?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems right. Around 70.
So you grew up in Atlanta. Your dad worked for GPB. Your mom alternated between being an educator and a homemaker.
Mm-hmm.
And you started playing music in high school.
I was thinking back, and I realized that I started playing the drums in elementary school.
Yeah.
We didn't have middle school, so just elementary school, high school.
Wait, is it a private school or something?
No, that's just how DeKalb County schools were at the time.
Okay.
But in 6th grade, they started doing band, and you could choose your instrument. And I wanted to play trumpet, and understandably, my parents were hesitant to invest in renting a trumpet.
Yeah. Did you have braces or not?
Yes.
It's very difficult to maintain the embouchure over the top of braces.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And there were 2 of us. So
older, younger?
I have an older brother. He's 5 years older than me.
Oh, gosh. Now, I'm curious. Was that like an influence? Did he leave records for you when he moved out of the house, or?
So it was definitely an influence. My older brother was extremely attractive, extremely popular, and I basically wanted to be him for most of my young life. And so bands that he got into, I got into.
Like what bands?
REM, that was one of the first that he kind of got me interested in, and then Red Hot Chili Peppers and Smashing Pumpkins. So this was all between 1989 and 95.
Yeah, your brother sounds like he's around roughly the same age as me.
Yeah.
Was he a musician or not?
He tried, but didn't. It wasn't really his gift. He had many other gifts, but lots of his friends were. And that's actually where I ended up getting my first drum set.
Oh, yeah?
His friend was a drummer, and he was ready to move on to a different set. And so my parents bought it from him for me for Christmas when I was 15.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What was that first kit?
It's the same one I use now. So it's a Ludwig 70s 4-piece, I guess.
I think I've seen that kit. Is it also the Butcher Block?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Butcher Block Cortex. Mm-hmm. Man, that Cortex stuff is bulletproof.
I mean, it's lasted.
Yeah, that stuff is amazing. It's basically vertical grade cabinet formica. And I have a black Cortex kit now that I got for playing in punk rock bars. Like, it can get beer spilled on it. It can have things thrown at it. It can be thrown in the back of a van. And it's going to last. I mean, I put it in cases, but, road life's hard on gear. And that little bit Cortex, especially the 70s 3-ply drums, they sound amazing. They look great, and they're super durable.
Yeah, I love it, and I've never really seen a reason to get a new kit.
Yeah.
It's done its job. I love the way it sounds. It's great.
So you move from Atlanta, inside the perimeter, to Athens for college.
I moved to Greensboro, North Carolina for college.
Oh.
And I was up in Greensboro for 10 years.
Did you go to UNCG or Guilford?
Guilford.
My mom went to UNCG.
Oh, wow.
I'm from Eden, North Carolina, which is about 40 minutes from there. There's no reason at all to leave Greensboro to go to Eden unless you either lived in Eden or were from Eden, or you were dating somebody from Eden.
Right.
But right there is Reedsville, which is where, what's his name from American Aquarium is from. I just blanked on his name. He's a, Americana guy, very, very successful. He's from there, and he has a record called Rockingham that's about Rockingham County, which is Eden, Reedsville.
Huh.
Yeah. It's a melancholy place for me now.
Interesting.
All my people are gone. My mom passed exactly 4 years ago last night, and my grandparents are long gone. I have one cousin who I'm still in touch with who's moved to LaGrange, Georgia. Huh. He's older, but yeah, it's a beautiful country, but the mills all closed and the town just fell apart.
Right.
So you did 4 years at Guilford?
4 years at Guilford, and then I stuck around for quite a while after that.
There's really a poppin' little music scene in Greensboro.
It was great. I mean...
Did you play there?
I did. I didn't start playing in a band until like my senior year of college, but then played in a couple bands and got to travel a little bit.
What bands?
See, the first one was called Pelagic. And then I was in a band called Fist Fight.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Seems like I've heard Fist, because, I played in some different noise rock bands, Powder Room, and, of course, Pinky Doodle Poodle, a band from Tokyo. And we played Greensboro at New York Pizza a few times. And I remember seeing either Fist Fight Graffiti or somebody mentioned it or something. I thought, God, that's a good name for a band. I wish I thought of that.
I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, and, that's where, of course, the Cinemechanica guys met.
Yeah, so I got to play... like Bryant's band before that. I've forgotten what it's called. Mackenzie something. I can't remember. But I was doing booking at College Hill Sundries, where a lot of those bands were playing.
Is that neighborhood where New York Pizza is and that coffee shop?
Yeah, it's right at the little dive bar up the block.
Yeah, and I played a show there back when the earth was still cooling and there was snow falling. And I walked across the street from New York Pizza into that coffee shop, and there was like a jazz trio. They were really good. They were like clearly music kids from either UNCG or Guilford, and they were just killing it. And they were playing that like early 60s bop stuff that I really love. And I had a cup of coffee and I was watching the snow come down, and I thought, this is pretty good. I was really happy for a minute there, you know.
Yeah.
I love College Hill, and it's so close to my grandparents' house that I that whole part of the world is sort of special to me.
Greensboro is a great town. I feel like I was kind of definitely in a bubble at Guilford.
Yeah.
And then at a bubble, my little world.
Yeah.
After that. It's interesting. It's grown up so much. Like when I was there, downtown was dead after 6 p.m.
Yeah.
And now it's really taken
That's
off.
a big theater. What's that theater called? Is that
I can't remember now.
Last time we played there, we stopped at a bakery like a block from that theater. I stood there like munching some incredibly like authentic French pastry, drinking coffee, looking at that theater, thinking it's pretty good too. I've had a lot of those moments in Greensboro, you know.
Yeah. Greensboro, I think, was the first time where I had friends that were in bands that were really, really good. And got to like make records, like disband, who ended up like recording and kind of putting out with Hello Sir.
Yeah.
And Kudzu Wish, which did a lot of traveling, and just like people that I actually knew were in these bands that were really, really good.
Yeah.
And it was really inspiring. Be like, oh, real people do that. I could just do that.
So how many years did you stick around after graduation?
About 5 or 6.
Yeah. And then you moved to Athens?
I moved to Savannah briefly to be a nanny for my nephew when he was first born.
Oh, okay.
And then came here for school.
And your brother's family's still in Savannah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What does he do there?
He's a teacher. He teaches 3rd grade.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
How is he dealing with the impending school opening with COVID-19?
It's really stressful for him. Fortunately, his wife, she's able to work mostly from home.
Yeah.
So kind of whatever happens, they're able to figure it out.
How old's your nephew now?
He just turned 15. I know.
It's crazy, man. One minute you're holding a baby, and the next minute they're like, "You need a ride?" like, do you need to shave? What is happening? Like, man, it's this fall is really stressing me and a lot of the people I love out really badly because nobody knows what to do about their kids and school.
Yeah.
What do you guys? You guys are. We're in Clark County here, so it's all remote until
some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, I mean, it's what we needed to do anyway.
Yeah.
Because my mother is also like elderly and medically fragile, and so it just wouldn't be possible for our kids to go to school.
Yeah.
But I don't know how we're gonna do it.
Yeah. Yeah, today my wife was like, "You need to register our daughter for school," and I was like, "Oh, am I registering for an online thing or a school thing?" She's like, "Well, she has to be registered at her school, but she's still going to go to school." It's just this huge clusterfuck, and it is what it is. You know, I'm just trying to deal with it as one day at a time.
Yeah, and like with the here, they're choosing to do synchronous learning, from what I understand, and trying to have all 3 kids focused in doing that while we're working. I have no idea how that's going to happen.
How long were you in Athens before you joined Incendiaries? Was that your first Athens band?
I think I might have started playing with Shitty Candy and the Circus Peanuts before Incendiaries.
And we started talking about that last night when we had our first run at this interview, and I just knew Shitty Candy and the Circus Peanuts from just still photos I'd seen on the internet, and it looked absolutely insane.
It was.
Yeah. And to hear you describe it last night as a punk rock band that was largely improvisational with classically trained aggressive ballet dancers made me think, fuck, I'm so sorry I missed this.
It was a lot of fun. It
Yeah.
was so much fun.
There was a woman who it was her brainchild, right?
Right. Jeannie Wiggins was the mastermind behind it. Went to UGA for dance and was a teacher, and just has one of those brains with not only like bizarre epic ideas, but full on faith that they can be executed. Just kind of intensely positive.
I call that Orson
Yes.
Welles syndrome. Orson Welles never lacked the confidence of his vision and was able to shepherd so many absolutely absurd, untenable projects into reality that I aspire to have that level of vision and execution. And she had that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of intoxicating to be around somebody
Yeah.
like that.
Well, it just feels like you're in an adventure all the time.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many shows did that band play?
Gosh. Lots.
Dozens.
Yeah. Yeah.
When was that?
Would have been like 2008 to 2015. It went for a long time. It
Yeah.
kind of had like swells and retractions and swells and retractions.
Yeah.
But yeah, my favorite show that I can think of is like kind of the best example is we got to play in Atlanta at the Star Bar.
Uh-huh.
And it was like an all-day festival. And I don't know how we got on this. This is another thing where like Jeannie could just talk her way into anything.
Yeah.
Like people just gave her stuff and were like, yes, do this thing.
Yeah.
And it was like metal bands and stuff. So after these like kind of sludgy metal bands, we got on and we're all in costume. Like everybody has alter egos.
Did you have an alter ego name, like a roller derby name?
Yeah, so I was Jolie Rancher, which I actually took from somebody else who was smarter than me and came up with it.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. But so we have the band, just like a three-piece band. And then at that time we had four dancers. And we, there was Jell-O
Oh gosh.
everywhere and like throwing candy into the audience.
Yeah.
And so after we got done, like when we started, everyone's faces were just completely flat. Just like, what is even happening?
I mean, there's an incredible power in that.
Yeah.
Like,
But,
there have been moments where 5/8 opened for bands we had no business opening for. And by the end of the show, they were either throwing bottles at us. They threw bottles at us when we opened for Uncle Mingo at the Music Farm in Charleston. Bottles and lit cigarettes. They hated us so much. And we just fucking gutted it out. But there's also been moments like we opened for Cop Shoot Cop, the New York noise rock band that everybody, was super edgy, and a couple of heroin addicts in the band, and that was the sort of, at that time, was an imprimatur of authenticity for New York City noise rock bands. And we played about 3 songs, and Mike Mantione just got naked, like played the whole show, just freed the hog, and we looked over, and the Cop Shoot Cop guys were standing there with their mouths hanging open, like, how do you follow that?
you're like, yeah, how do you follow that?
Yeah, that was in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah, by the end of the set, like people were into it a lot. There were people like up on stage with us, but the great part was after that we got to watch these really stoned metal bands try to like navigate the stage that was covered in Jell-O.
That's hilarious. That led you to, well, at some point, Rickson was in that band too, right?
Yeah, later on, our drummer, Mary Jane, she moved to the Midwest. Or no, she moved to Portland.
So you didn't play drums in Shitty Candy?
No, I played guitar.
Yeah.
Badly, which was actually kind of perfect. It was
Yeah.
like part of the aesthetic.
Yeah, okay.
But But yeah, so when Mary Jane moved, Rickson stepped in for a couple shows.
What kind of guitar do you play?
I have my uncle's old 63 Fender Jaguar. I know, right?
Yeah, you can't see out there in radio land that my mouth is hanging open right now because those guitars, they fetch like, tens of thousands of dollars now.
Yeah, Tammy. No. This is not what we're doing. This is not.
The cat is now tangled up in her mic cord, which is hilarious. Get that roach, buddy. Get it. This is a great cat. Folks, I wish you could see this amazing orange cat.
Oh, Tammy. We first named her Pumpkin, and then we got to know her personality, so she's Tammy now.
Tammy, like...
She's just a Tammy.
Because, the Music Hates You thing always used to be like, you need to get your shit together. Tammy's going to be pissed.
That actually kind of sounds on point.
Yeah.
Basically just the whole, like, when I think of Tammy, I think of, I do what I want.
Yeah, that's her. That's Tammy. Yeah. Tammy's different from Karen.
Very.
Tammy minds her own fucking business and wishes you'd mind yours too. Karen, not so much.
Don't do it.
Tammy, you're hilarious.
Oh my God, I'm going to have to take this cat inside.
She's fine. You got plenty of slack on that mic cable.
Let it go.
She has got it too. So Rickson joins Shitty Candy, and at some point you become the drummer for Incendiaries.
So yeah, right when we started Incendiaries, Erica Strout and actually Natalie Cool and I started, and we couldn't find a drummer, and I was like, I'll try it out, and it was not a good fit. Just I'm not technical enough for kind of what Incendiaries was going to be.
We talked a little bit last night about the contrast between the personalities of Erica Strout, guitar player, Incendiaries, and Mandy, the bass player, Incendiaries, and how Erica is very sort of left brain driven, incredibly creative, but also like does not like to leave things to chance and likes to rehearse a lot. I've played one show with Motherfucker and rehearsed more for that show than I think I'd rehearsed for any other. Like the number of rehearsals to show ratio was absurdly higher than any other band I'd ever played with. But then Mandy Branch, the bass player in Incendiaries, is like the Glinda the Good Witch of musical creation. Like she just waves her magic bass and magic happens. Lovely things happen.
Yeah, beautiful creative stuff happens there. Yeah, fortunately, like Natalie wasn't able to continue playing bass because she was living with Warner Robins at the time, and thought of Mandy. I had tried out to play drums with Mandy and Eric for what became Down with the Woo, and that was not a good fit. But I got to meet Mandy, and asking her to come play bass was the best call ever. And we went through, like 4 drummers before we found Rickson, and knew after the first practice, like
there's no drummer after Erica Rickson.
No, there really isn't.
You don't think, oh, we could probably do better, because she can't.
No.
She's so amazing.
So good.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from every woman in that band, but I learned so much about kind of rhythm and like how to accent things and ways that vocals and guitar can go along with rhythm to make it more powerful.
How long was Incendiaries together?
Like 7 years.
You put out one record and started on the second, is that right?
Yeah, one record and one EP.
Yeah. And then circling back to your father's distress that he is free of now. It was along towards the end of Incendiaries that he had his suicide attempt, correct?
I think his suicide attempt was probably a year or two before.
Yeah.
Maybe even 3. I'm really bad at chronological time.
Yeah.
And kind of...
What was it like to find out that your father had a suicide attempt?
It was shocking.
I'm
It
sure.
was really shocking, especially...
You have described him to me as being a fairly soft-spoken, laconic guy. Does not have a lot to say. And then out of nowhere, you find out this thing that's completely out of character for him has happened.
Yeah. I think it was really shocking also because he was raised super Irish Catholic.
Right. And suicide is a mortal sin.
Yeah, and that just wouldn't have occurred to me that it would occur to him. But at the same time, thinking, like, in kind of retrospect, he is probably one of the smartest people I'd ever met.
Yeah. Well, you described him to me in a previous conversation as a guy who understood broadcast technology from the tubes up, which as a certain kind of guy through the 60s and 70s who mastered those technologies. And they were generally, and I'm not a psychologist and I'm not going to do an armchair diagnosis, but oftentimes I meet those guys and they're a little spectrum-y, you know?
I can certainly see that
Yeah.
for him, yeah. And, like, the guy did the New York Times crossword and pen every week, like... And I think being really smart was part of his identity.
Yeah.
And how...
Where was he from?
He was from Cumberland, Maryland, railroad town.
Yeah. Was this... And when did his family come from Ireland?
I don't know, honestly.
Yeah.
I think they went to Canada first and then moved down for railroad jobs.
Yeah.
But I think for him, kind of... It was such a part of his identity to be the person who understands what's going on, and then all of a sudden, he doesn't have that. And it went away so slowly that I can kind of understand. Like, that was his role in our family life, is like being the really, really, like, book smart kind of figuring out complex projects, and he wasn't able to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And that helps me understand kind of
the depression
how
around
that happens. Yeah.
Did you see any signs of him having a cognitive decline before the suicide attempt?
I didn't.
Yeah. But you were
my
there
mom
every
didn't,
day.
But she says, again, in retrospect,
Yeah.
like, she started kind of thinking about, well, wait, actually, you know, he always did all their taxes.
Right.
And their taxes got screwed up a few years, kind of right in there. And she just kind of assumed, like, oh, it happens, he screwed up. But in retrospect was like, wow, yeah, that might have been when that started.
Yeah. So how long after his suicide attempt did they move down here to be closer to you and your brother?
I think it ended up being about 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
When they started trying to sell their house. And like, that whole process took about a year.
And your dad's move, you told me, it took a toll on his cognitive ability.
Yeah, before they moved down here, he was basically able to, you know, dress himself, feed himself. He would sit in his armchair and read for most of the day. But he was able to basically function. He couldn't drive, and he had to quit the choir because he wasn't able to kind of follow along with the music anymore. But besides that,
were they still going to Catholic church then?
No, he actually. My mom had been married previously.
Yeah.
And so he, instead of paying $2,000 to get an annulment, he left the church and they went to the Episcopalian church. So, like, kind of the same.
Yeah, Catholic light.
Yeah.
Yeah. your parents moved down here at the same time that you were in the process of becoming an adoptive parent.
Yeah, so that's part of why they moved down. So I was in the adoption process for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah.
And
let's put a pin in that just for a second, because we're both adoptive parents and we know when you say the adoption process what that means. And I don't think a lot of people understand that, like, just to be green lighted to adopt in Georgia, there is an almost like national security level investigation of your life that leads up to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you were single at that time.
I was single at the time. Yeah. So because of that process, I just wasn't able to travel to North Carolina.
Yeah, to
help them.
Yeah.
As much as they needed. And once a child was placed with me, there would be 6 months where I literally could not travel.
Right.
For 6 months.
Right.
Yeah. So after that year, and not making any forward movement at all, I went through a private agency in town, still working with kids that are in foster care.
Yeah.
And that was much better for me. And it went more quickly. But just through that process, knowing a kid could show up at any time.
Right. And that's the other thing, is once you're green lighted to adopt, you kind of go into this airless vacuum of, it could be tomorrow, it could never happen.
Yeah. And so after many discussions with my parents and my brother, they decided to move down here.
Yeah.
To Athens. And of course, the way it all worked out is that they moved down in October, and then the next week my son moved in with me. Because of course.
Because of course.
Of course that's how it's going to work. We knew going in, like, this is what's going to happen, because that's the most stressful way for it to happen.
Right.
So of course it needs to be like that.
Right. Were you still in Incendiaries at that point?
I had left Incendiaries.
Yeah.
So once I started with the private agency and I got matched with 3 separate sets of kids that all fell through. Oh
God.
I started realizing, like,
that's the other thing.
There's
that you might be matched with a kid, and at any point in the process of, like, you could be buying baby furniture and clothes, and all of a sudden it just goes away.
Yeah. But I just realized that I couldn't. I think I had to turn down maybe like 2 shows, and I just realized, like, it was not fair to my band. They really wanted to be playing out, and I couldn't even commit to, sure, in 6 months I can do a weekend trip.
Right.
Like, I couldn't commit to that.
You've been working with Jason Roach, and you guys had Maximum Busy Muscle at that time, and that's why that band has 2 drummers.
Yeah, so Jason and I had been playing together for a very long time. Eventually adding a bass player, and then around the same time I decided I needed to leave Incendiaries, asked Erica Rickson if she would be interested in double drums for some of the same reasons, and that if I wasn't able to play, they'd still have 1 drummer.
Right.
Which is, also a testament to her ability, that she was able to learn double drum parts with me.
Yeah.
And also just have in her back pocket in case a single drum part, which is baffling to me, but it's fantastic.
Erica is one of those people who has channeled so much of the uncertainty of life into a desire to just own her craft. Like, she's one of the most emotionally driven drummers I've ever seen, and just owns it. It's really great.
Seems like a combination that I don't know that I've seen elsewhere, like a combo of technical craft. Like she will practice a thing for hours until she gets it.
That's one of the reasons I think her and Stroud are such a good match in Motherfucker, because they share that like commitment to the repetition to the point of just honing it down to a razor's edge.
I think they're also able to make it through the shitty part of that.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was always a challenge for me. For me, it felt like it's not there. We've been doing it for an hour. Let's change it.
Right.
Let's do something that feels right the first time.
Right.
Whereas they really have that ability to just push through, the snipping at each other and push through to get it.
Yeah. But Rickson not only has that incredible technical ability, but also like brings a spontaneity and a passion to her playing that a lot of those more technical players don't bring.
Yeah.
That's a pretty narrow slice of the drumming world. Mac McNeely from Jesus Lizard, I think, Britt Walford, Slint, and the sort of Kim Deal side project stuff. Those two guys have that. But, man, I can't really think of many other drummers like that, She's really one of a kind.
Yeah.
So you guys were doing Maximum Busy Muscle, and then your parents moved down, and then boom, you're a mom.
Yeah. I went from playing in like 4 bands to playing in no bands, having a 3-year-old, and caring for my parents.
And when we spoke about this last, you talked about the most incredibly grueling schedule that just sounds like it would squeeze every bit of creativity out of your life. Tell me about that schedule again.
Yeah, so I think we did it for about a month and a half or 2 months before we realized it was not possible at all. But basically, like getting up around 5:45, getting my youngest on the bus, and then going to my parents' house and like getting my dad up and changing his diaper, getting him dressed, getting him breakfast, going to work for 8 hours, picking my kid up from after school, making dinner, and getting him to bed, and then going back to my parents' house to change my dad's diaper and get him dressed for bed and get him into bed.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Yeah.
Every morning, like after I left my parents' house, I would stop by and get 2 donuts and a huge iced coffee on the way to work. I definitely put on like 20 pounds in a month because it was the only way I could push through it, really.
Yeah. So I'm sort of getting into the particulars of caring for a parent with dementia because at least 2 members of 5'8" have had a parent that got Alzheimer's and ended up needing around-the-clock care that was provided by a combination of family members and professional nursing staff. And you all tried that with your dad for a while, but it didn't really click, huh?
Yeah, he hated it. We tried kind of a full-time nurse, and he just hated it and took a really steep decline.
Yeah.
Kind of into, like, there's this, with dementia, there's kind of this typical, just like yelling, kind of.
Yeah.
For extended periods of time for no discernible reason, and he kind of slipped into that. And so after maybe a month or so of that, my mom had surgery, so my dad went to stay, for the weekend, kind of temporarily at like a dementia ward of a nursing home. And he was kind of different there. He was more aware.
Yeah.
And then when he came home was a really steep decline. And that's when... And also trying to take care of my mom from her hip surgery while doing what my dad needed. It just wasn't feasible.
While your mom was medically fragile and you were seeing these outbursts of yelling, was there any fear that your mom might be in danger?
No. No,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the only danger would be if she was trying to, like, lift him or help him
Yeah.
at a time when I wasn't there.
I know that one of my close friends, his father, kind of just succumbed to dementia. He would occasionally panic because he would look around a room and not know any of the people in the room. And that was really hard for him.
Yeah, luckily my dad mostly retained his memory of who people were.
Yeah.
I think definitely the past 6 months, 8 months, he confused me and my mom a lot.
Yeah.
So didn't really recognize my mom, but thought I was her. But mostly he was able to retain that, which is really good.
Yeah. Is there anything about that arc of your father's care that you would change? Is there anything you would do different?
That's a great question. I think probably putting him in a facility earlier than we did.
Yeah. How did he do in the facility?
He did so much better there.
Yeah?
Yeah, so much better. And I think, like, some of that is, so he was in the Navy.
Yeah.
And then after the Navy, he joined a monastery for a while. And just, like, structure and kind of small spaces and knowing what's going to happen next has always really agreed with him.
Yeah.
And I don't think this would be true for many people that are experiencing dementia, but for him, having that kind of structure made him, it was just so much better for him.
So a Catholic monastery?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, a Christian brother.
Yeah. Where was that?
I know he was in Philadelphia for a while.
Yeah.
I feel like he started off somewhere in Maryland, but then went to Philadelphia. And taught high school for a while as a monk.
Oh, like a Catholic high school?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then got disillusioned with which kids they were helping and which kids they were not helping. And just kind of the whole thing.
One of the things I've noticed about people who are a little spectrum-y is a profound sense of injustice when they see unfairness and how frustrating they find that. And so that sort of dovetails with this picture you're painting of me of this guy who really likes structure, really likes things to be somewhat predictable, really analytical. Like, I could see how that could be really... There's just any large institution, especially something like the Catholic Church, is just rife with inherent contradictions. And someone who is really into consistency and really into fairness would not last long in that environment if they were unable to reconcile those contradictions.
Yeah. Yeah. The only time my dad ever yelled at me, I was probably 9 or 10, and I told a racist joke that I didn't realize was racist.
Oh, man.
And it was, I mean, I still remember this moment of, like, him looking back at me while we were in the Subaru, like in this little car, and just yelling about how I should never, ever say anything like that ever again. And he was really disappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff was really clear to him.
What was your father's name?
Tom
Joyce.
Tom Joyce. Yeah. So he left the monastery to be recruited for a semi-pro football team in Florida. And it's actually how he ended up in Atlanta.
Yeah.
He put all his stuff, which was very little because he was a monk, on a motorcycle and rode from Philly and stopped in Atlanta. I think he had some Navy friends there.
Yeah.
on the way down to this Florida semi-pro football tryout thing, and discovered the team folded while he was in Atlanta. So he was like, I guess I live here now.
Yeah.
And
that's wild.
Yeah, through like military connections, found the job at GPB.
Yeah. So your dad seems to have thrived somewhat in the structured environment of this managed care facility. And how long was he there?
He was there for 4 years.
Yeah. And you visited him fairly frequently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, luckily, we were able to find a place really close by.
Yeah.
So I was able to go a lot, which is good.
Yeah. And you continued with Maximum Busy Muscle? Is that right?
Yeah.
You guys made a record 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Yeah, I think 3 years ago. Yeah, 2017.
Yeah.
So yeah, we continued playing. It was kind of perfect because all the other 3 musicians were involved in other projects, or really intensely involved in work. So it being kind of hit or miss of who could be at practice and how it was going to happen was great. Jason Roach musically is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so he would
really
just write out his stuff on MIDI.
Yeah.
And chart it out and send it to us so we could listen and kind of do it that way. So it worked out really well.
You read charts?
No.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going on there. Literally with Maximum Busy Muscle, especially when it was just me and Jason, or just me and Jason and Adam, every song I'd be like, wait, how's this one start? Is this the or you'd be like, it's the do. I'm like, all right, I'm ready.
That's funny. I had a conversation. So I have the reason you're not wearing headphones right now is because my other pair of headphones has been sent back to the manufacturer for repair. The guy's name is Gordy Knutson. He makes these, he takes shooting protection, hearing protection, the ones you would wear if you're going to go to the rifle range or something, and puts a Sony driver in it. And that's what I use in the studio because it gives you this incredible amount of hearing protection from the sound of loud drums, so you don't have to dime the click track to play in the studio. And those crapped out, but he called me the other day and said, okay, your headphones are ready, and we just started yip-yapping. He's Steve Miller's drummer now, and we were talking about how when you're in the middle of a long tour, it's funny how sometimes if you played something the same way, which fortunately Steve Miller Band, he's allowed to stretch out some, but I know drummers who've been on long tours, and they're dealing with tracks, they're dealing with dancers and lights, and it has to be the same every night, and then you sit down to play and just go blank because you've been relying on an unconscious muscle memory, subconscious set of skills, and if that one day happens to be out to lunch, man, that's bad.
Yeah.
But that tends to be I have that problem when I'm first learning a band's material for the first time. The first couple of shows, I'll be staring at the set list thinking, oh, man, how's the song start? So I get that.
Yeah, with Busy Muscle, being kind of math metal, it's so intricate that I just always had to have notebook paper next to me with we do A times this and A prime times this, and then the noodly part comes in, and then we do the triplets.
I finally started writing charts because after the Psychedelic Furs tour, where I had to learn 21 songs in 3 days, and did not write
Shut
charts.
up! You played with Psychedelic Furs?
I did the 2007 U.S. tour with Psychedelic Furs.
That's something I've never been able to do as a drummer is sit in well, even for a song I know really, really well.
Yeah.
Just sitting, I can't. I'm not good at that.
I'm learning guitar right now, and I the other day I thought, am I trying to learn guitar the way I play drums? Because that took 30 years. to be able to just walk into any situation and play. Like, I don't really have a band yet, and that's different. Like, it's a completely different thing to learn to play a band's material than it is to learn to just play.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've almost always just thrown myself at it.
Yeah.
Of like, I kind of know drums. Here's some people who want to be in a band. Sure, I'll play drums, and then just
I feel the same way. So
figure it out.
Yeah.
When I was playing drums in Greensboro, I got to see. I was actually talking on another podcast with Christopher Williams about this the other day.
Oh yeah, I love that guy.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah.
I got to see Desark for the first time.
Man. When did you see her? In Greensboro?
In Greensboro, so it would have been 2002 or 2003, so early on.
I wonder if Evan Rowe was playing drums for her then.
Not then, no.
Okay.
It was still the first guy.
Yeah.
And like watching them play just blew my mind, and that's when I was like, I'm going to play guitar.
Yeah.
I want to do all of that
Right.
that's happening right now. I'm just going to learn how to play guitar. So then I ended up in a band playing guitar.
Yeah. Around that time, there was an explosion of incredibly gifted women guitar players. Desark, of course. Lorraine K. Newman. You know LKN? Mm-mm. She was from Pensacola. She moved to Portland, I think. She was one of the first people to play that guy, the electrical guitar company, the Aluminum Guitars. So this guy, Kevin Burkett, who's originally from Pensacola, I think he's now in Birmingham, makes these either aluminum neck or fully aluminum guitars, like the Travis Bean sort of style thing. And she was the first person I ever saw play one. And she, just like Desark, was absolutely a force of nature as a player. Lorraine K. Newman was also a great drummer. She passed away last year from cancer, really unexpectedly to everybody. I think she played it very close to her chest, and it's a fucking shame. And I guess Amy from Desark doesn't play anymore either.
Yeah.
It's just done with it.
I remember reading that.
How much are you playing these days?
Well, since COVID.
Yeah, I guess none of us are playing.
Very little.
Yeah.
Before that, I had started doing Ghost and Goat, which is just me and Erica Rickson.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of straightforward blues and yelling.
Mm-hmm.
And then started a project called Sewer Kitty with Christian Filey and Loretta Adams.
Mm-hmm. Of course, Sewer Kitty is Mandy Branch's feral cat that she feeds, right?
Yeah.
The big orange cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Loretta Adams from Hot Breath.
Yeah.
And
how's Loretta doing?
Okay. Not great.
Our friend Loretta, who we're speaking of now, suffered an unspeakable tragedy last December, the loss of her teenage daughter.
Yeah, I think not being able to be around people and not being able to play is really hard on top of how hard I can't imagine. But yeah, I think she had been playing with us for just a few months when that happened.
Yeah.
We were fortunate enough to get to go up for the PRF Thunder Snow.
Yeah.
In February, before right before all this happened.
That's right. So that was a Sewer Kitty show?
Yes, that was our first and only show so far.
Yeah.
But I think I know it was really good for me and really good for her as well to kind of be surrounded by this incredible, positive group of people that don't know her.
Yeah.
And so she was able to share or not share her story.
Yeah. So the PRF, which most people who listen to this podcast a lot know, but not everybody knows this extended international community of music fans that are sort of based around the Chicago recording studio that is owned by Steve Albini, Electrical Audio. There was a web forum there, and it ended up branching into a whole culture of live music and cooking and some microbrewing, and we started to have these annual summer barbecues, as they call them, because up there a barbecue means just cooking out, as opposed to down here where it's a whole cult. But the PRF barbecue was kind of one of the moments for Motherfucker when they went up there and sold $1,000 or more worth of merchandise on their first big outing. The PRF really embraced Motherfucker, and by extension embraced Maximum Busy Muscle. Maximum Busy Muscle went to the Louisville barbecue, right?
Yeah, we went in 2016.
Yeah, so the PRF's barbecues started in Chicago, but now they have PRF barbecues in Louisville. There was one in the Bay Area. There's a couple in New York City. There's been one in the UK, and bands come from all over the world to play those, and you pay one fee to get in the door, and after that, everything is free. Live music, well, except band merchandise, but live music, beer, lots of seltzer, because there's a lot of guys like me that are on the other side of drinking a lot, and lots of food. And so the time that you went in 2016, that was kind of right in the middle of a whole lot of shit in your life, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I was really excited to go. It was the first time that I had been out of town without my kids, without my partner, and not for work in maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
And it was really inspirational, rejuvenating. I didn't realize how worn down I was until I got there. And just these incredibly positive people, so supportive, and also around my age. Which is kind of rare. Oh God, the number of times I've been out with either Powder Room or Pinky Doodle Poodle, and I've looked around and I've been the oldest guy in the room by a decade or more, sometimes 2 decades, and thought, oh God, I bet I feel old. But PRF barbecue is all, people our age still making incredibly vital, driven music, because it's not really, the principles of that creation aren't guided by commercial goals. So they just make music because they love making music. It was amazing.
Yeah. How many bands were at the Louisville barbecue? Do you remember?
No idea. No idea.
It was like 3 days, right?
3 days.
Probably 10 bands a day.
It was... Wow.
Yeah.
It was so incredible. We went back the next year, 2017, and I brought my now husband. Because I was like, you have to see this.
Right.
I had talked about it so much. And just the vibe there, and feeling like it almost felt like when I was in my mid-20s and just too dumb to know that I wasn't that good, and just super excited to be doing the thing. Yeah. It felt like that. In the 2017 one, we actually did an Incendiaries reunion for one song at the end of Motherfucker's set.
Oh, no shit.
And that was incredible and emotional, and because we hadn't played together in years. Yeah. And so we just sat in the we sat in the basement the day of. We sat in the basement of Sam's house where we were staying, Sam of Bon Air.
Yeah.
And
I interviewed Sam
with a acoustic guitar, trying to just remember how it goes. We're great.
Yeah, and that's a guy, Sam Skolton, who experienced a tremendous loss. He had found his life partner, and they were deeply in love, and then she got cancer.
And the way that he has moved through that is amazing to me.
He's a very elegant and graceful man.
And kind of accepting the pain and the sadness of it while still living out her legacy of, living his life the way she would want him to, is awesome. Yeah, he came down for our wedding.
Yeah.
We actually got engaged like a week after the PRF that I took my now husband to.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it was that, like, the change there, or this is going to happen, was that he hadn't really seen me outside of the stress of caring for my parents and work and then parenting. Like, he hadn't seen that part of me. And just being able to be free and positive with all these really supportive people.
It's funny how you acclimate to the emotional work of taking care of parents or parenting yourself, and you don't realize that a part of you is just like shelved for now.
Yeah, and I
I feel like we're kind of in that same sort of tunnel right now with COVID-19. Like, I keep finding myself craving a vacation, but I don't even know what that would mean. Like, what do I mean by vacation? Like,
yeah.
But there's a lot of just domestic work that goes into having an entire family under one roof 24/7. You're cooking and you're cleaning and you're cooking again and you're cleaning again and trying to structure the kids' day. And
yeah, I've found definitely some parallels between now and that time in my life where I was like changing my dad's diaper every morning, like that hell time. In that, like, the first similarity is that I can only focus on doing the next right thing.
Yeah.
I can't plan much of anything, really.
Yeah.
And that there's just this rage kind of seething, like, right under the surface.
I think that's a drummer thing. I think that's part of, I know that I struggle with being mad a lot.
I was never an angry person until I was a parent. Like, never.
You said your dad yelled at you one time when you were 9 or 10.
Yeah. Like, I never yelled or none of that until I became a parent. But I also became a parent in this kind of, like, really intense scenario. But I've had to do so much learning and, like, some really kind of deep ego work about that. Because I think since I wasn't an angry person, I didn't grow up with any of the tools of, like, how do you handle that?
I grew up an angry person. I'm still all fucked up.
Still dealing with it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's I just think that anger is about fear, and fear is part of the anxiety of worrying about the well-being of your kids, and just, like, for me, there are moments of disruption of my plan and just the frustration of having those plans thwarted, you know.
Yeah. That anger is fear thing really speaks to me. And that, like, I'm an adoptive parent, but also a transracial adoptive parent.
Yeah.
So I'm raising a black son in our current situation. And I think a lot of my anger as a parent comes from that fear of, like, I need you to be able to do this because like, if you're not able to follow a direction the first time, you could fucking die.
That's something that people get shot for.
And
by the police.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And, you know, being a white woman, growing up, I didn't have any of these conversations. Like, nobody had to tell me this stuff because it didn't affect me. So I don't have that toolkit.
Yeah.
So kind of the constant fear for him, and then also fear that I'm not doing it right, or, like, I'm not giving him the tools he needs to keep himself safe.
That's the scariest part about being a parent. This constant fear that I'm gonna fuck her up. Mm-hmm. You know.
I mean, I also think about, Like, I had two really good parents growing up. Very, very different. So we've talked about, like, my dad being a very quiet man, like, very structured. My mom is basically the opposite.
Yeah.
Like, kind of very outspoken, very social.
Yeah.
Not super organized, but, like, very driven.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a really good balance. I had two great parents, and I still made some fucking awful decisions. Awful decisions.
Yeah.
That, because I had two great parents and I was middle class and white,
Right.
didn't have huge repercussions.
Yeah.
Motorcycle time
Yeah.
in our neighborhood right now. But, you know, my kid might not have that luxury.
Yeah.
Everybody's up and yelling now.
Right.
Like, we talked about the other night about how, like, 5/8 was the band that kind of my group of high school friends were really into, and we would sneak into places to see.
Yeah.
And, like, if we had gotten caught...
Right. You would just gotten kicked out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It would have been like, call your parents,
Right.
have them pick you up in a story.
I can't tell you how many little skater dudes when I was like 19 and 5'8" or 20, and these dudes were like too young to get in, but they weren't that much younger than me. I got them in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But they were all white kids with skateboards, and like the worst thing that would have happened, they would have gotten thrown out, you know.
Yeah.
But if they were black or indigenous people of color, like,
I have no idea
Yeah.
what would happen. Yeah, I think about that a lot. Just that I had the privilege of making so many mistakes that my kid might not have the privilege of making.
yeah. Yeah, man.
I also think about it with music, in that I love the music that I play, and I love the people that I'm surrounded by, and like the PRF, I love that. But bringing my kid into those spaces, I feel like there's tons of positives.
Right.
But it's also like, white people make this music.
Yeah.
And not exactly what I want to present.
Yeah, I mean, there are
to him.
exceptions, especially in Louisville, because you've got Cass Green. She's the bass player in
Yeah.
Young Widows and some other bands. And then, of course, Fez Razi is in Fez Zeppelin. And
There are definitely exceptions. I'm not
Yeah.
saying like it's, 100% white folks, but
yeah,
just the nature of the music that I play is.
pretty white. Yeah.
And so what am I communicating to
Yeah.
him? It's something I think about. I haven't decided, like, or I don't think there is a right or wrong about it. It just is.
Hey, Crash and Ride would like to let you know about a new industry-wide initiative focused on mental health called Backline. Backline is a hub for artists, industry professionals, and their families to quickly and easily access mental health and wellness resources. Backline has partnered with leading support organizations and care providers to streamline access to services specifically geared towards the music industry. Go to www.backline.care to get the support that you need to thrive both on and off the road. The way that Backline works is you contact them via their website or their 800 number, and they will connect you with a caseworker. That caseworker will be familiar with resources in your area to get you the mental health care that you need. If you need to talk to a therapist, they can put you in touch with a therapist. If you need to talk to a psychiatrist and be evaluated for meds, they have a list of psychiatrists. They have resources for inpatient therapy. They can put you in touch with sober companions. If you need someone to travel with you while you're on the road and help you stay out of trouble, Backline is a really end-to-end comprehensive solution for people who are struggling in the music industry. Now, a little closer to home, if you're you're in the Athens, Georgia area and you're a musician struggling with anxiety and depression, you can contact NutriSpace at 706-227-1515 or go to nuci.org. That's nuci.org. NutriSpace is a nonprofit musicians resource focused on suicide prevention. Here's how Nutris works. If you contact them and you say, hey, look, I'm in crisis, whether you're a musician or not, they'll connect you with resources in the Athens, Georgia area. If you're a musician, that health care will be subsidized. In my own case, I was able to see a counselor for $15 or $20 a session. If you're not a musician, they'll do their best to connect you with low-cost or sliding scale options for mental health care in Athens. NutriSpace provides a lot of resources for musicians in the Athens area. They have low-cost practice spaces. They have a gear sale where they're constantly selling secondhand gear. They've got a low-cost recording studio. They're really just an amazing asset to the Athens, Georgia music scene, but their primary mission is helping people who are depressed or anxious get better. Go to nuci.org, that's nuci.org, or call 706-227-1515. And finally, no matter where you are, if you're struggling with anxiety and depression and you're contemplating self-harm, you can always call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-TALK. It's 24/7. It's free. It's confidential. They have trained volunteers to help get you through your crisis and get you the help that you need. Call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Do you practice?
No, not really. If I'm being honest.
I mean, I haven't played drums. I had an audition with some people who I really love. They had socially distanced and were really rigorous about protecting themselves. And about late June, they were like, "Come play with us." Mm-hmm. And we're starting a new thing. And I went and I played with them, and they were really extraordinary. And I just wasn't. My head wasn't in it, and it wasn't because I don't love those guys. 'Cause I really do. But I just wasn't. I'm stockpiling beans and 12 gauge. Like I'm not. I'm not in a place where creativity comes easily. But I have been playing guitar every night.
Yeah.
So.
I've been before we moved. Like when we were packing, I would go down and play the drums for like 20 minutes. Every night just to like get the out.
Sure. Yeah.
But I found it bums me out, but I found that in my brain, quarantine was going to be like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I'm going to play guitar every night and write a bunch of new songs and it'll be great. And, no, first of all.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of Maslow's hierarchy that assumes that you're not worried about the future constantly. Mm-hmm. Like to be able to play at all, to create at all. And that's where what I think happened with that audition in June. Like I just, like this part of me that couldn't unclench enough to absorb new material.
Yeah, the only thing I've found that has gotten me to play is the PRF monthly tribute. Yeah. So they pick an artist every month and people do covers or songs inspired by, etc. Yeah. And so I've done a few of those and that has helped.
How are you recording? What's your rig like?
My rig. Yeah. My rig is my phone. Oh. So I use an app called BandLab. Yeah. And record keyboards, vocals, guitar, drum.
So it's got like a 1/4-inch input and you can just go right into it, or?
Well, it probably does. I myself just put my phone on my lap and wear headphones. Yeah. And record it that way. Okay. And it's been really, I've learned a lot. It's been really interesting. I've also, like the few things that I have been able to write, I found sending them off to other people who are also having writer's block. So like John Hasty from Nonagon I
Super
sent
talented
off like a riff
Yeah.
to him of like, make this better.
Right.
And he was in a writing block at the time, and you know, it was kind of mutually beneficial
Right.
for him to have something to focus on, and for me to be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what should happen there.
Yeah. So the PRF Songwriting Challenge, for folks who aren't familiar, is it was weekly for a while. I guess it's monthly now. But you know, at this web forum that we're a part of, there's an announcement one day a month, like, this week's songwriting challenge is David Bowie, and you either cover a David Bowie song or write a song in the style or that is influenced by David Bowie, and you've got a sort of finite amount of time to get it done. Like, it used to be 5 days. I guess it's a little longer now that it's a monthly
it's
challenge.
a month now.
Yeah.
The cool thing about BandLab is I've been able to collaborate. Like, I worked on a track with Christian Filey and Mandy Branch. I think 2 months in a row through BandLab, so I can like send him my track and he can add to it and send it back. And so that's kind of kept things moving a bit.
Yeah.
But
My brother just, like, out of nowhere sent me this beat, this like thing he had cobbled together out of drum sequencing and using a bunch of Middle Eastern instrument sounds, and I took it and put a bunch of guitar on it and did some mix moves and sent it back, and it was the most satisfying thing I've done musically, you know, since March 11th, the last show I played. But I needed that kick, you know. I needed that like I wasn't sitting there like I have been with my guitar staring at a blank screen. I was just told, here's a thing, it's in D.
Yeah.
You know?
Having a prompt.
Yeah.
In D.
Yeah.
So when I played with Fist Fight, so the first band that I ever played guitar with,
Yeah.
like, kind of the inside joke was that every song was in D because that's the only chords I could figure out. Like, I never really knew, or I still don't really know chords.
Right.
The way I learned was just I would like pluck the E string and then the next string and then put my finger somewhere.
Right.
And if that matched, great, and then keep going that way.
Yeah.
Like, but apparently everything that I discovered through that that system was in D.
Yeah.
So we have a whole album, like 12 songs in D.
That's great. Well, what sort of, like, what self-care are you doing in the pandemic? Like, how are you keeping yourself afloat?
So I think in the beginning, the first thing I realized is that, so I mentioned last night that I have ADHD. And so the first thing I realized was that I have to have a workspace that is big enough for me to have all my calendars and my Post-it notes and lists and all the things that make my brain work. I think also just through this whole experience with my parents and like becoming a like surprise parent and things really sucking for a while, one thing I gained from that was the ability to just sit in this sucks for a while. To just sit in it and stop trying to change everything and make everything better.
Yeah, I think there's a certain power in being able to accept that you're in a tunnel for a while. And I think that's one of the places that the government is just failing us as a country, is they just refuse to accept that we're in a tunnel. And as a result, aren't doing the things that we need to do in order to get out of this fucking tunnel.
Yeah. I mean, there's also been a lot of Netflix going on.
Yeah.
That's been good.
What are you watching?
Wow. I've watched so much. So I really, really love shitty TV. Like,
Oh, yeah?
love it. Love it. So like Bones, fucking down.
Yeah.
NCIS, I'm down.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of that stuff. Star Trek, a whole lot of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Alias just came back on Prime.
Yeah.
So watching some of that. But yeah, just crappy TV that lets me turn my brain off.
There seems to be like a streak of bad TV connoisseurship that runs through Motherfucker, Incendiaries, and Maximum Busy Muscle.
That sounds right, yeah.
Yeah.
I had this concept that I swore to God I was going to play out, and maybe I will. I've done one video so far. But basically, my friend Audie, for my 40th birthday, made me a puppet of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the concept is a video where the first part is the puppet saying whatever, your goal was for the quarantine.
Right.
No. It would be me saying whatever the goal was for the quarantine. And then it's like cut to the puppet being like, no, you're fucking not going to do that. One of the submissions was like, I'm going to do yoga and mindfulness at least 3 times a week. Like
Right.
the cut screen was the puppet being like, no, you're fucking not. The only thing you're definitely going to do 3 times a week is doom scroll until 2:15 a.m.
Right.
That's it.
That's me. If I'm not playing the guitar, I'm not working in the garden, I'm not cooking. I'm scrolling down Twitter going, oh God, what is happening? When is this ever going to end? But
Growing vegetables has been a big... I've always wanted a garden, but so we just moved into this house.
yeah.
Has it been a week? 2 weeks? I have no idea.
Wow.
A week or 2.
You just moved in. That's right. Yeah.
Maybe just a week.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the first time in 10 at least years that I've lived somewhere that gets sunlight.
Yeah.
So I've been very excited about like growing stuff. There's something really empowering and like fuck the man about growing your own food to me.
Man, you're telling me.
Same with being able to fix your own bike.
Right.
Like just the same feeling of like I do what I want. Like I don't need you.
Well, if you want to do a fall crop of potatoes, I can help you with that. And
Nice.
There's a lot of green stuff you can plant in the fall. Collards, cabbage, turnip greens.
Yeah, I'm excited to like actually have a yard where the deer aren't in
Yeah.
it all the time.
I built some boxes and
Yeah.
fill them up with composted stable muckings, and which I can help you find that stuff. And
Yeah, so that's been a help. I think and we talked a little bit about this last night. Like the biggest thing for me, so one of the taglines for one of the PRF barbecues was "Don't quit."
yeah,
And Erica Rickson has a tattoo of that, and I eventually got a tattoo of that. But just the concept to me is that you don't have to be your best all the
Right.
time. You just have to keep showing up. And so keeping that in mind kind of every day during this, that there's no way I'm going to be my best. And there's no way my kids or my spouse are going to be their best, or coworkers. It's just not possible right now. What's important is that we don't quit.
yeah,
That we just keep showing up with whatever we have
yeah.
at the moment.
Because I mean, option B is not good.
Yeah, another thing that has happened during this pandemic, so I've never been a depressed person.
Mm-hmm.
Ever. I've actually really struggled to understand depression because
Yeah.
it's so foreign from the way that my brain works.
Right.
Never really experienced anxiety. But during this, I've had pretty intense bouts of both.
Yeah. Man, the first time people who aren't used to depression dip down in it, it's. I feel like as someone who's lived with it since I was like 10, like to see someone else who's normally somewhat buoyant just like slip out of the life jacket and plummet into the deep dark sea. I'm like, oh no, like just hang in there. It's not permanent.
Yeah.
You know?
I didn't understand what was happening. I had several like panic attacks.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand what was happening. And fortunately, fortunately, I have a husband who's very supportive.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he has experienced and dealt with that most of his life.
Right.
And so was able to tell me, like, this is what's happening to you.
Yeah.
It's completely understandable and normal right now. But I think it also gave me lots more empathy in that I really wasn't able to understand depression outside of just, being a social worker.
Right.
I kind of know the medical and the technical and the clinical stuff, but was never really able to understand how that happens and what that does to you.
I think a lot of people are experiencing uncertainty and hopelessness and anxiety in ways that they never have before. And you moved in the middle of it, which moving I find incredibly stressful. And difficult.
It's the first time I've moved as a person that works from home, and that has been incredibly challenging because I don't have my space for all my stuff that makes my brain work.
Right.
Which I think, for me, similar to my dad, having the structure of going to a place, going to my office, and this happens there, and I am this personality there, and this is my role.
And I'm here for these hours.
Yeah.
And right in the middle of it, I go to lunch.
And that is gone.
Ancient history. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I usually wind these up with a series of 10 questions.
Okay.
And if you want to jump into that, we can.
That sounds good.
Everybody gets the same 10 questions.
Yeah, I kind of remember these from the
Rickson's.
previous
Yeah.
podcast of yours that I listened to, but I don't remember what they are, so exciting.
Okay. All right. Question 1. Tell me the fondest memory you have of a meal that you've had.
Oh, yeah. Growing up, we would always go to Wilmington, North Carolina for Thanksgiving.
We would go to Wilmington, by the way. I didn't mention this earlier, but we went to Carolina Beach for the summers every summer. So I know that area pretty well.
Yeah. And my great aunt lived on the Intercoastal Waterway.
Yeah.
And she and her neighbors would have oyster roasts.
Oh, yeah?
Like huge oyster roasts and huge family reunions. So there'd be 150 people there.
Wow.
I never really liked oysters, but there was always a dessert porch.
Yeah.
So we'd get to hit the dessert porch and then walk down to the water. Yeah, those were great.
What were the desserts? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. So my favorite one, I don't know what it's called, but it's Chex, the cereal.
Yeah.
Filled with chocolate, covered in powdered sugar.
Oh, there's a name for that. I can't remember what it is right now.
Me neither.
It's something like garbage or something. Somewhere, someone right now is screaming at their computer or their headphones like, it's called blah, blah, blah.
You're going to get messages.
Yeah. It's crashing right at protonmail.com, folks. If you want to tell me what an idiot I am for not remembering what the chocolate Chex Mix is called. A lot of my big memories about food are also around family. So, yeah.
Me and my brother always had this thing at family events. We were not great at socializing, so we would kind of like stand in the corner.
Yeah.
And like kind of make fun of everything that was happening.
Yeah, yeah.
But also really enjoying everything. You know how
the way punk rock
teens and
teenagers
tweens
do.
do. Yeah. Exactly.
It's a thing. So the second question, I offer you the option of answering one of two questions because this question can be particularly difficult for women as it was originally written because society does terrible things to women. The original question was, what is the most frightened you've ever been? But when I interviewed someone early in the podcast, a woman, I got some side eye like, do you really want me to dig up that trauma right now? And so now, and she very gracefully said, well, here's the one I'm prepared to tell you about. But the other question you can answer if you're not comfortable with that question is, Tell me about a time you were braver than you ever thought you could be.
Honestly, I think that those hell months of parenting, and my child was going through a lot of challenges at that point. It was pretty intense. And
when you first adopted your son, did he get really upset at bedtime?
After the honeymoon period, yes.
Man, same. Just tears and screaming.
Yeah.
And I think, tell me if this tracks with your experience. I think that she had been moved so many times in the night that she was afraid she was going to go to bed and it was all going to go away.
That makes sense in that situation. Yeah. Yeah, we didn't have that specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes sense in that situation, definitely.
She wasn't verbal yet. So she was still struggling with, she had a couple of basic words. So I don't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it since, but she doesn't remember either.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, I had never pictured myself changing my parents' diapers.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think that time, not that I did a great job.
Yeah.
But being able to just function and, like, put on a somewhat reasonable face.
Yeah.
Through that.
Yeah, there's a kind of fear that I think working class people experience that upper middle class and upper class people never do. And I think metal kids express it as dread. Like there's dread in heavy metal, But I think that what that is an artistic representation of the feeling that this might be all there is. And that is a pervasive melancholy I've experienced at times when I was without hope, when I was depressed and just working my ass off, or in the tunnel that you're describing. There's a dread that comes from thinking, this might be my fucking life.
Yeah. What if this never changes?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. You say, like, metal. Like, to me, Uncle Tupelo kind of, like,
oh yeah, they
encompasses
get that. Sure,
that
they
feeling.
totally get that. Yeah, I love that band. I hate that those guys are estranged now.
Yeah.
Because that band, one night they played the 40 watt, and I was like the only one of my friends who knew where they were, and I dragged everybody there. And then I was like, after the show, I was like, look, I brought all my friends, and they were like, can we stay at your house? And so Uncle Tupelo and all of the drive-by truckers, all of the dashboard saviors and I stayed up all night long.
Wow.
Like, so their tour manager at the time was the guy from the Bottle Rockets. And he plays guitar and writes songs, and everybody had acoustic guitars. Todd McBride, Mike Gibson from Dashboard Saviors, all the Uncle Tupelo guys. And then the two drummers just sat there like, wow, this is great. Like, at some point, I think I pulled out a pair of brushes and played like a paint can. But
yeah.
they, did
awesome.
long black veil and some Marty Robbins stuff, Big Iron on his hip, and like just all these classic country and country rock songs. Like, I mean, the sun came up on us.
Wow.
And God, I love that band, Uncle Tupelo, so much.
Yeah, I came across them in high school on one of the, what was it called? Red Hot and Blue mixes. It was like mixes to raise funds for AIDS.
AIDS research, yeah.
Yeah, AIDS research. And I think I bought it because it had like a Lenny Kravitz song on it or something.
And Seal and all that stuff.
And Uncle Tupelo was on there with a song called Effigy that was just like...
That song is so great.
Holy shit.
Yeah. It was like... Discovering Uncle Tupelo was like discovering that the things that I liked about Sonic Youth could exist in a Southern band.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind.
Growing up in the South, like hearing that kind of music happen, like incorporating all this different stuff and still having a Southern
Southern
side
accent
to it unapologetically.
Yeah. It was something
fucking
else.
Awesome.
What a great band. What is the thing in your life that you've lost that you regret losing the most?
I think when I started taking medication and like doing therapy for my ADHD, a lot of things got so much better. It was awesome. Like before that, I moved every 4 months and I was always in debt and I was a terrible friend. And
what do you take now?
Now I take Adderall.
How much?
30 milligrams.
You know, I struggle with ADHD, and someone gave me one of the new ones to try, which is really reckless. And as a guy who's a recovering addict, you know, I did a lot of I talked to my GP about it. I talked to my therapist about it, and they were all like, we can try experimental dose of X number of days. And I was just like, you know, there's this guy in my office who's got ADHD. And he had the medicine they were talking about putting me on, and so I took a half dose, and I felt like I'd done an 8-ball, and I could not stop talking.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, this is not going to work for me. And that was my last experience with trying to fucking deal with it.
Yeah. Like, getting medicated and getting therapy was awesome in so many ways, and I'm so much happier as a person, but I lost a level of, like, joy and spontaneity.
Yeah.
And I really miss that a lot. It still pops up, like, randomly, kind of. Actually, the PRF events, it pops up, but...
Do you feel like that loss of joy and spontaneity is as much about taking the medication, or is it also about just having more responsibility as an adult? You've got a full-time job and a kid and 2 stepkids, and...
I think it's both. But also just... learning about and recognizing how my brain works and what I require to be functional and not in debt and not awful to people I love.
Right.
It just means that I'm more of a taskmaster, and I definitely miss the spontaneity that I had before. It led to a lot of awful decisions and bad things. But
what was the furthest away from where you thought you would wake up that you ever woke up during that period of time in your life?
I mean, not distance, but like emotionally.
Yeah.
I was in a really, really good relationship, and really thought I was going to marry that guy.
Yeah.
And woke up with someone else.
Ooh.
And at that time in my life, like before medicine and therapy, the way I interpreted the world is just things happen to me.
Right.
Like, and after that, after medication and therapy, being able to see that there are choices that I make. Like, I make choices and these things happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm sure that night was really joyful and super fun and spontaneous.
Yeah.
But I lost something. And no doubt I'm so happy I'm where I'm at.
Yes.
And that is a part of it. But it was an awful thing to do to someone that I really, really cared about.
The only regrets I have about the reckless periods of my life are not the things I did, but the people I hurt.
Definitely. And like, I didn't even realize that I was making a choice to hurt somebody. It didn't really even occur to me.
Yeah. A scattered mind is really reckless.
And a scattered mind that's always looking for input. Like, always looking for change and excitement.
Well, it's interesting. So much of our conversation tonight has been about being able to be in the moment, even if it's not good. And that sort of ADHD thing that you're describing. And for me, my addiction and alcoholism is very similar in that, like, if I previously in my life, before I kind of got my shit together, could not sit in a bad moment, would have to find some way to change my perception of it using chemicals or to create some conflict so I wouldn't have to sit in the sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's on point.
Yeah. Tell me about a time you received an act of kindness from a stranger.
So, I know immediately what the moment is. I'm just trying to figure out a way to tell it without sharing too much of my son's story.
Yeah.
So, right after the honeymoon period,
Mm-hmm.
It was really, really hard for both of us. And oh man, we had gone to a restaurant to pick up food for us and my parents. And my son melted down.
Yeah. He
completely.
was 3 at this point?
Yeah, 3.
Yeah.
Completely melted down. His vocabulary has always been years ahead of his age.
Yeah.
So to hear him talk at 3, he sounded like a 7-year-old probably.
Yeah.
But he lost it, and I had to carry him, like, leave the food, carry screaming, kicking child back to the car, which most parents have had this experience before.
Oh man, I'm remembering the time it happened to me.
The difference being that I was this white woman carrying this small black child who was screaming about how I was hurting him and stealing him back to my car. And it was clearly overheard by lots of folks. And in the drugstore next to the restaurant, apparently people were about to call the cops.
Yeah.
Understandably. Like, I totally get that.
Yeah, yeah.
But thank God, a woman in there is also had also transracially adopted. So her son was also black.
Yeah.
And she came out.
Man, what are the chances?
I know, right?
Yeah.
She came out and was like, "Do you need help? Is everything okay?" And at this point, I have, like, closed my son in the car, and he is, like, flailing, banging on the windows. Like,
so he's not in a car seat yet?
No, I couldn't get him into the car seat.
Yeah. Just got to let him spin down for a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was so kind and so helpful and just kind of told me that she had been there. And then, as he kind of wound down and I started sobbing,
Oh, man.
she gave me a hug and went back into the drugstore and told folks not to call the cops and that it was okay. And just the kindness of, like, not even seeing what was going on, just hearing, like, ooh, and taking the time to walk over to a stranger.
Yeah.
And check in.
Man, thank God.
Yeah.
For that lady.
Yes. I don't know what we would have done. I don't know.
Yeah. What's your favorite place to gig?
I haven't played too many places.
Yeah.
To be honest. Now, I would say the Caledonia just because
Right.
it's comfortable. It's like...
You're not the first person to say that.
It's like our living room.
Yeah, it's home base for a lot of people.
Yeah. Playing the PRF Thunder Snow was really great.
I've never done Thunder Snow.
I had wanted to go for years.
Man, me too. It's just a bad time of the year for us because my wife's the theater professor, which means that she has a full schedule of classes, and then she runs rehearsals at night. Mm-hmm. And that is heading into the show for spring semester every year. And so she's gone from pretty much 6:30 in the morning until midnight. And so for me to I'm going to Michigan, it would just be the biggest disaster.
Yeah, it's 2 of our kids' birthdays.
Yeah.
Right around that time. But this last year, just the whole setup is great. And we got to play at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which is kind of rare when you're playing a show, but it was awesome.
Everyone's still sober at Thunder Snow then. Or mostly sober.
Yeah, well,
Thunder Snow, for people who don't know, one of the PRF events is that they book this entire hotel on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan at the coldest time of the year when it's cheap and nobody wants to be there, but the roads are open and you were beside the frozen solid Lake Michigan that you can walk out on. And it's 3 or 4 days of constant music and late night dance parties and people just hanging out in rooms and just, man, it's Dionysian, but also incredibly. All those people who live in the upper Midwest have different lives than we do in the wintertime. We still do stuff. But, my friends who live in Minneapolis, my friends who live in Chicago, my friends who live in Madison, Wisconsin, basically tell me that around late October or early November, you just button down and you go to work and you come home. And anything that you do creative or musical is probably in your basement by yourself because it's just too fucking cold to go do stuff. And then Thunder Snow happens and all those people go to this hotel and just many, 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 many beers, many, 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 many meals. Everybody's just in there. I need to go. It seems like an amazing event.
It's really awesome. And, as people have gotten older, their kids have gotten older. So they've started bringing their kids, their teenagers. And
yeah.
It's just really neat. So, yeah, I would say now that's kind of my favorite.
Visa and income considerations aside, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
Also a great question. I've always wanted to live in Bavaria, so specifically
Really?
Munich.
I've never been to Munich.
It's awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's awesome. Having a black son, that has changed a bit. I'm not sure. There's very few black people in Germany, shockingly.
Yeah. Do you speak German?
A little bit. I did.
Yeah.
I was pretty close to fluent, and then since it's declined.
Yeah, people ask me all the time, I used to be fluent in French and used to be fluent in Spanish, and both of those have just fallen off the cliff, especially since COVID started. It was not uncommon for me to go to the taqueria 2-3 times a week and have conversations, and now I don't know if I could even order food.
Yeah.
You got to use it.
Yeah, definitely.
So when were you in Munich before?
I did one of those semesters abroad.
Oh yeah.
There. So I was there for about 6 months.
Was that college or high school?
College.
What
I was there in high school a little bit too.
What did you major in college?
Religious studies.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was when I moved, right before I moved to Athens, I was deciding between seminary and social work. And actually applied and was respectfully declined to Harvard for their seminary. But
their loss.
Yeah, right?
Totally. I mean that sincerely. Like, who ends up at Harvard Seminary?
I don't know.
You would have brought such a different set of values and perspective to this sort of cloistered Ivy League seminary program as someone with semi-rural Southern roots. Like,
Yeah, possibly. I think at least one or two of my classmates from Guilford ended up at Harvard
yeah,
for seminary. Yeah, I ended up doing religious studies because it was like the only thing out of all the classes I had taken, like freshman, sophomore year,
Yeah.
the only thing I really cared about, like kind of drew me in.
yeah. Well, having a Catholic dad who had been a monk at some, I think that would, I could totally see how you would end up there.
My initial job plan,
Yeah.
career plan, was to build outdoor sanctuaries.
Yeah.
That's
Like
what I wanted
grottos,
to do.
Like a sort of St. Mary kind of grotto thing, or?
I don't know what that is. I should know what that is.
So it's not uncommon to have a garden with a meditation area with an effigy of Saint Mary, and sometimes in the Pieta where she's holding Jesus. Sometimes it's just her looking beatific, and those are sort of maintained as places to go and meditate and think about the mystery.
Similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that did not pan out.
Are you particularly religious now?
No. And I don't even know if I could say that I'm spiritual.
Yeah.
I just think the world is so much bigger than us.
Yeah.
And I think it's more about like gratitude
Uh-huh.
than any kind of religion to me.
Mm-hmm.
Of just, maybe that is the religion, like being grateful for this huge world in which we are tiny, tiny little pieces.
Part of tackling the sort of parental frustration that we talked about a few minutes ago for me is to remember that I almost didn't have this little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And even though there are times when we drive each other crazy, that I'm so grateful that she's in my life, you know. Gratitude is a huge part of me staying on top of my shitty brain.
Yeah.
Do you ever imagine a perfect musical instrument? And if so, do you already own it or not?
I do not currently own it.
Yeah.
But I have owned it in the past. I believe that the keytar is the perfect instrument.
Yeah?
Perfect instrument.
Do you play keys?
I play the keyboard a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do a lot of my writing actually on a piano. It's
Okay.
easier for me to like figure out chord progressions that way.
Sure. Which is interesting because the way the chords are structured on the guitar is so intuitive and like it doesn't change, but
Yeah, not so much for me.
yeah. Yeah.
But the keytar is just gorgeous. Like you can hold it
Mm-hmm.
and it'll do beats. And you can kind of play melodies and move around. It's perfect.
Is there a particular like Yamaha or Roland or some other brand of keytar that you're really into, or is it just any keytar?
I don't know the brand, but I definitely have a favorite one
Yeah.
that I feel like I did like a Neil Young cover on. But it had this banjo setting
Mm-hmm.
and also a delay setting. So it was like this crazy kind of carryover delay of a banjo picking thing that was...
I love everything about this.
Yeah, how can you not?
What Neil Young song did you do? I have to know.
Comes a Time.
Oh, of course. Perfect.
And I love the keytar, and I'm just now that we're talking about it, I'm super pissed that I don't have one right now.
Well, the next question is there an instrument that you've owned at some time and lost that you desperately wish you could have back?
That's the one. I also had this air organ for a while.
Yeah.
That was,
Like
I
a
loved
calliope
it.
or like a pump calliope or
No, it had a fan.
Oh,
You
okay.
flipped the knob and the fan came on.
Oh, like a fun machine.
Sure. I mean, it was.
Yeah, you know
Yeah.
the Fun Machine? It's
No.
I think Baldwin made it. It was the kind of organ that was in lots of suburban homes when I was a kid. You know,
This one was like portable.
Yeah.
And it was little.
Oh, okay.
And I liked it because I could do, like, I could play drums and play it.
So it had foot pedals.
No, I just played it with my toes. It was just like a...
So it's like they say everything's a foot pedal if you're willing to kick it. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
It was like an octave and a half.
Yeah.
But I could, like, play drums and play it and sing and, like, kind of write that way.
Yeah. You don't have either one of those
I
anymore.
have no fucking idea. Like, I know the guitar belonged to somebody else in a band, and I was super sad to see it go.
I feel like if I called, what's his name? The guy who was the founder of Double Ferrari.
Jace?
Jace. I feel like if I called Jace would know
He might, yeah.
where that guitar is.
Where's the one with the delay banjo?
Right. He would know.
The air organ just fucking disappeared.
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea where that thing is.
Was it in a practice space and just vanished? Or
Yeah, and I think I had gotten it from Charlie, the bass player from Disband.
yeah.
He was like, I'm not doing anything with this. I
Right.
was like, it's heaven.
If you could be a guest with any artist, perform a song with any artist alive or dead, who would it be and what would the song be?
Oh, God. I would never want to do that.
We talked earlier about how you're not super comfortable dropping into a situation.
Oh, God, no.
Yeah.
I really don't know. The only thing I can think of that would be super fun and not great, but super fun, singing with the Gossip.
Oh, yeah. I met their former manager at South by Southwest one year, our former label head, and heard a bunch of stories about how intense and turbulent and amazing that career arc was. Like how intense and amazing just the act of them being discovered and becoming a thing really fast was.
Yeah.
And I think that you would probably have really enjoyed, based on the stories that I heard, that it is wild and like, I mean, a lot of people get this idea that being in a band is fun, and sometimes it's fun. It's also really fucking hard, and becoming successful doesn't make it less hard.
Right.
You know, you're reinventing the wheel all the time, and you know, 5/8 used to draw inspiration from a lot of different artists. Like, why did we tour the way we did? REM toured the way they did, so we toured the way they did. You know, we played every pizza place and taco place and any place with a stage and a PA. We'd play there for 5 or 6 years, you know. But there was just like, we weren't REM. We were 4 completely different dudes, and we went through that experience as the guys that we were, and for better or for worse, with substance abuse issues and depression issues and anxiety issues and money issues and fear issues, and so yes, the Gossip were an incredibly intense band, and that experience was very intense for them, but also like there was a lot of good shit that happened because that band was that band, you know.
Yeah. I love that band.
Good band. Yeah. Last question. If you could imagine a taxi that can go anywhere in time, and you climb into that taxi and you say to the driver, hey man, take me home. Where is home?
I guess Briarwood Drive. I had got to live in the same house my whole childhood.
Yeah. In Atlanta.
Yeah, in Atlanta. And after that, I moved a lot
Yeah.
until right now.
You just moved.
Yeah. But I'm not planning on moving from this house for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So I think, Briarwood Drive, when I think of home, that is still...
Tell me about that house, in your memory of that house. What is your impression of it, if you were trying to describe it to somebody?
It was very much like our family at the time, squarely middle class.
Yeah. Like a split level ranch kind of thing.
Sorta. Yeah. Like, we didn't have central air. There were like air conditioner units in the bedrooms.
Yeah. God, one of those things can get a bedroom so cold, though.
Yeah, super cold.
I miss that sometimes. You just turn that thing up about an hour before bedtime and you walk in there and it's like a meat locker. You're like, I was sleeping good tonight.
Yeah, one bathroom for a family of 4, and like the bathroom was the only place where you were guaranteed privacy. So like each family member would spend at least half an hour in the bathroom.
Yeah.
We had a really nice like fenced in backyard, and behind that my dad had his garden. So like during the summers, kid jobs were picking beans and tomatoes and cucumbers and
what else did he grow?
I think those were the main things.
Yeah.
I think there were watermelon and lettuce sometimes, but the main things were definitely
beans, tomatoes, and cukes.
Yeah.
Same as my garden, honestly. I put up so many pints of pickles this year. I don't know what I'm going to do with them all.
We just ate a lot of them.
Yeah.
I roller skated a lot through the house. Downstairs when I got my first drum set. So you would like go down the stairs and it was just a dirt floor.
Yeah.
And that's where I played.
Yeah.
My dad had his garage with all of his things he was going to fix.
Right.
Which means it was just like floor to ceiling, wall to wall stuff.
Yeah.
I don't even know what was in there. Yeah. That's home.
Yeah.
Riding my bike around the neighborhood until nightfall.
Until the streetlights came on. That's when I had to come home.
Oh, yeah, we didn't have those. We didn't really have the streetlights.
Yeah. My folks bought a little place. Sounds exactly like that sort of same situation in the suburbs when I was 3. And we lived in that house until my parents got divorced. And ride your bike in the neighborhood. All the kids. I can remember all the kids' names that were my neighbors still.
Yeah.
You know. And it wasn't... in the South... Unlike where my wife grew up inside the city of Indianapolis, like she knew lots of Polish families growing up. We had one Polish family in our neighborhood, Steve Wojciech's family, and the smells that would come out of the kitchen window of Stevie's house were just so amazing, and I never knew what they were until we moved to Chicago, and we went to this restaurant called Staropolska that's kind of out on the west side. It's a Polish place, and I walked in the door, and I was like. It's the smell, and it was pierogi and like cabbage rolls, and that was the smell. And I was just like, I'm gonna eat this every day for a long time,
forever.
Yeah, it sent me rocketing back into my past. And well, I really appreciate you doing this, especially after such an intense day.
Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, it kind of worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
In that. I mean, not that I've had a lot of time since my dad passed, but I think him passing and me being just the tiniest bit outside of it gave me... It made it easier to think about how it's been instead of being in it and trying to think about how it's been.
Yeah. A lot of our peers are now losing parents or having parents who have dementia and or just need end-of-life care. And man, it's tough.
I feel like this, like on my list of things to do this week is to get long-term care insurance.
Yeah.
Because of this. Like, without that, I don't know what we would have done.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that are trying to care for aging parents at home, and when they have dementia, it's a real challenge.
Just the physical, even just the physical
Yeah.
of it. Yeah, I don't know how we would have made that work. So I am endlessly grateful to my parents for having thought ahead that way.
Yeah. Well, the next few days are going to be a lot of logistical stuff, a lot of stuff. In my experience, there was stuff that I didn't even think about, having to buy a casket and plan a ceremony. Of course, it's going to be very different for you because of the current world situation with COVID-19, but
yeah, I'm not really sure how all of that's going to work. I mean, another wonderful thing that they did was being very clear in their wills of exactly what they want.
Yeah.
So, cremation, no funeral. Like, probably without COVID right now, we'd be planning like a party.
Yeah, I think the part that makes me sad for you is that when my mom passed, I mean, there was just a tidal wave of fried chicken and potato salad and all the things that you expect when a Southerner passes. And look at me. I'm clearly not afraid to eat my feelings, and so I had a couple of days of just coping with it that way.
Yeah, you actually just missed Erica Rickson. She came and dropped off food here, and she had just been at my mom's house dropping off food there and talking to her with masks on. And
I would jump on a hand grenade for that girl.
She's
special.
Yeah. And, I think that especially like her experience with her mom was so much more traumatic with her mom's death.
Yeah. If you're curious about that, she talks about it in great detail in the interview I did with her last year. So I don't want to try to summarize it now because I feel like it would
There's no way to.
Yeah, it's just too disrespectful. You have to really understand Erica's experience. Listen to the interview. It's in 2 parts. I think it's episodes 34 and 35.
But I was really impressed with the way she leaned on her friends at that time.
Yeah.
So I remember calling and just asking, like, what do you need? And she was able to tell me, like, I need you to contact Tea at Little Kings. I need you to book the event. I need you to get flowers. And, like, so it taught me a lot because it felt so good to be needed and that I had a task and I was somehow helping my friend.
Yeah.
That this time when she was like, what can I do? I was like, my mom needs food. She hasn't cooked in a week. Like,
yeah.
These are the things that are needed, and really leaning on people when you need them is being vulnerable in that way is such a gift and a skill. I learned a lot from her during that time.
Yeah. Well, can't wait to see you play music again.
Me too.
And I really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. She's so cool, huh? Man, what a cool person. Really, really great talk and really down to earth and really knows how to put like the right thing forward as a priority. I'm really grateful she took the time to talk to us. I'm also grateful for Jake Kreger. Jake is the sort of producer of the show. He sends me show notes on the shows. He kind of set up and maintains the YouTube channel, and it's just a really solid ally, a good friend of the show. And I don't know where we'd be without him. Thanks, Jake. I also want to thank Gene Wolflick and the band The Powder Room for all the music that you hear on this episode and every episode up to now. The episodic music, the bumpers, everything you hear, what's underneath my voice right now, that's all the band The Powder Room. And I was just listening to that opening tune today as I was kind of getting set up to do this recording, and that is such a banger. That song is called Alcoholics and Meth Addicts. It's on the first Powder Room record, Curtains, which you can find at their Bandcamp, thepowderroom.bandcamp.com. Gene has a new project going with Erica, the singer from Motherfucker, and it's real departure from this sort of noise rock thing. It's more like a dream pop synth pop thing. It's really cool. It's called Dream Tent, DreamTent.bandcamp.com. They've got a full-length LP coming out in the next couple of weeks, and I would encourage you to go there and spend money on it. Buy it. Everybody's trying to figure out how not to get evicted right now. Every musician I know is trying to figure out how they're going to fold tab A into slot B and not end up with their whole life getting blown up. So this would be a great time to start spending money on Bandcamp if you're so inclined. Hey, reach out to me if you want to be on the show, or if you know someone who should be on the show at crashandride@protonmail.com. I'm particularly interested in talking to women and people of color right now because so far the show has leaned pretty heavily on white guys with guitars, because I'm a white guy who plays drums and that's who I know. But I would really like to tell some other stories in this format, so reach out, crashandride@protonmail.com. All right, I guess that's the show for this week. Man, I almost didn't come out with the computer dying and all that stuff, but I guess we crossed the finish line. Thanks for listening. Until we speak again, take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. Ask for help if you need it. Try to find a way to see some music on the internet or some socially distanced, safe way to see it. Support your favorite band. And remember, loud guitars save lives.